How to design a garden hose spray in SelfCAD. Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to review this interactive tutorial, this garden hose design. Going to already load it here, the tutorial, and I'm going to start. This is a very interesting design. It's going to show using Loft, something I've not shown in previous tutorials, I think. And I'm going to play here automatically. The first thing, we're going to create a cylinder. So what we're going to do over here, the parameters, is setting the size of the cylinder, and then it's setting also the segments. So it's adding segments to the cylinder. We'll see later why we need that. The segments over here are basically just the smoothness of the cylinder. Okay, so that's basically this. There's no horizontal segment, so meaning it's going to stay one piece over here in the height. And then we have the position, just to position them, the rotation and position. So if I click next, it's going to fill in automatically. You see we made that last round. That's basically the segments, but over here it's still one segment. And we basically, scaled it down and rotated everything within this set. And now we're finalizing it. Okay, so now what we're going to do over here is we can create another shape and basically another cylinder and doing the same thing over here. But what the designer is doing here is creating these objects, just positioning them another object. And this is very interesting. This is just a preference how the designer is doing it. I actually like this very much, which is basically the idea of kind of creating proxy objects, guides. So if you see over here, we created 3 objects, and these are basically just guides that we're going to use. So let's see what's going to happen next. The designer is going to simply group them together so we can operate them as one unit once they're grouped, and activating the edge mode so we can see, and simply going to select edges. But we want to select like loops, so we're going to go to the loop selection, the advanced settings, and we're going to simply loop select. So we're going to click on this. I need to rotate a little bit to be able to click on it, and then click on this one, and it selects entire loop. Same thing over here. I'm going to click next to select this loop, and then the same thing, this inner loop over here, and then the next loop, and then over here the loop from this one. So this is interesting, this loops, and then the final one, the outer loop. So we don't really care, these are not merged. If you're going to merge these objects, it will be difficult to select the loop. They will be retriangulated over here, but these are just positioned, and it's the same idea what we have over here. We're going now to copy this. Actually first copying for closing the tool, and then we close the tool. Okay, just how it's done. So what we have over here, we're going to isolate these edges now. So these edges, you could have drawn this, and this is just a way the designer has done it. But there's actually something interesting in SelfCAD where you can kind of play, you could do it however works for you. And I actually like this because drawing this by yourself sometimes may take more steps, or not necessarily more steps, but it's just more difficult to understand, to visualize it. And if you're used to working with primitives, it just gives you a kind of a visual reference, make it easier. Okay, so basically what we have accomplished here is we have a set of profiles. Now the interesting thing is these profiles by default, whenever you draw something, or if the same thing what we did now, we copy it from a mesh, they are created as a set of edges. And in SelfCAD, and basically in any software, 3D software, you have a difference between edges and splines. And we're going to use Loft, and Loft is mostly limited to splines. Not necessarily limited to splines, but I'll explain in a minute again. But now what we're going to do here is, if you go to round objects, it's actually all of these 3 tools. It's round object, simplify, and resolution. These 3 modification tools have the option to convert to a spline. So what we're going to do now here is we're going to convert it to a spline. Now what's happening here, interestingly, is you could have made the smoothness to 0. I'm not sure exactly the thought process from the designer here, but the smoothness was reduced initially to make it less smooth, and then the smoothness is added back with the smoothness to 1. A spline will always smooth out. So even if you made it 0, turning into a spline, the nature of a spline, it smooths out sharp edges. But here it's actually even increased by number 1 instead of 0, and it smooths out over here more. So I'm not sure exactly, but you could have technically just made it smooth to begin with. But we need to have the thing. So now we need to select all of these edges, and we're going to go to Loft. So once we enter Loft, here's the interesting thing is, so Loft basically has a limitation. That's the nature of Loft, because they work with splines. The way they work is, if you have something that is rounded, it must be splines. Meaning is, you cannot have tiny edges, like very small edges, a lot of edges, unless you convert them into a spline. You can have edges if they are, for example, longer lines. Like sometimes you want to have, let's say, an arc and then a straight line. You can convert part of the polygon. For example, the arc could be a spline, and the line could be a line. Otherwise they will be losing the sharp edges. So you can do that, but the arc itself, because they have many edges, they will need to convert to a spline. That's basically the idea over here. So in Loft over here, you can see we have the correct order of the profiles. Otherwise you can switch them around, but they are selected correctly. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to go to settings, and we're going to set this resolution to 15. We don't need that smoothness, and basically reducing the smoothness. Now this takes some time to process because it has a lot of stuff. In the normal real life, you have an option to cancel. You don't have to wait for any changes to process, but in tutorial we have to wait to let it process. And now we're going to finalize it. Now we're going to find, this is not the final deal, we're going to change it. And again, this is a preference of designers. Let me show you what we're going to do. We're isolating this so we can see what's going on. And this here is basically creates a kind of a, you know, you see, we're going to fix it. It's not basically the ideal how it's going to do. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to go again to advanced settings. We are still in edge mode. We never turned it off. So we're already in edge mode. And we're going to set loop selection again. So we're going to select this loop over here, clicking here, and this loop, and we're exiting out. But now instead of copying, we're actually going to add a chamfer. And what chamfer is going to do, we can make a small chamfer, just 2.1, and what this is doing, it's kind of flattens this space. That's what chamfer does, it flattens it. You probably could have done this with Loft, just adding another edge, but you know, it's easier. Sometimes you can mix tools, as I said before. SelfCAD allows you to mix anything, and this is going to be the same with the next idea. What we're going to do now here is we're going to select this edge, and now what we're going to do is inset this edge, inset it by 4, and then we're going to extrude that, negative extrusion, to add some indent, kind of negative by -8, so you kind of get this indentation over here, and then we deselect. So we're done with this part. Okay, now you could have done all of this in Loft. You can add another Loft here, another profile, and make it, but it's more difficult, and it's, if you're used to working with the basic modeling tools, it's often easier to, you know, just mix in that case. And at the end of the day, the part looks perfect how we want them to look like, and that's the main idea over here. Okay, so now we're gonna go to cube selection, and we're going to select from the right side. So we're going to select this here, -18 over here, just selecting this part. Now, just an interesting thing over here, the designer has on the exact selection, but actually this is not going to be used because we're selecting just this section. There's no cutting here on faces, so you could have actually turned off the exact selection because there's no need to cut here or anything. But nonetheless, this is just selecting, easy way to select this piece, and going to color now simply, and inverse selecting this other part, so we can give it a different color over here. And that's basically it, just deselecting, and we're done with this. I guess still rotation to give it an angle over here. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to start making the other shapes. So I said before, I think that this is the first showing Loft. Actually, I think I have a tutorial showing Loft before, but not what we're going to do now, is we're gonna do also rails. So now we're gonna create a new shape, and we're gonna start working with rails, which is very interesting. So we'll see in a minute. And we're gonna do here the same idea we did before, just creating kind of objects that are kind of like guides or proxies, whatever it is, just creating these objects. And now we're going to select these two objects. So we deselected the polygon mode, and we went on to selecting two objects. We grouped them, same idea as before. We're going to isolate so we see what's going on, and the same flow as before. We're going to copy some loops. So we're going to select the bottom loop here, and then the inner loop, and then the next loop. You see all these loops over here, and then the top loop. So, and then copying the loops, I just click next. It's the same flow as before. And now we're going to isolate them, and it's good, you have the same flow, easy to follow. And what we're going to do now here is, again, the same thing, turn it into spline. And again, the same thing, rounding it. I'm not sure why this is not made to 0, but that's basically it. Okay, so now we're turning off the edge mode, and we're going to go to 3D sketch. So this is what we're going to do here, is different than before. So now we have this basic profiles that we're going to Loft. What we're going to make this shape to look that you see over here, these curvatures over here, and it's kind of an organic piece. And you can do that with Loft by itself, but you need to add a lot of profiles to make it work. So for now, what we're going to do here is we're going to add simple spline as a connecting over here. It's going to show me where to draw. So let's see, click on the what is it telling me? From the plane list, select black front. Oh, okay, over here. So it tells me over here I have to choose the plane. So it's going to give me a plane where to draw, what to use, uncheck this plane, and we unchecking this profile. So we're going to make a new profile, and as you can see, I got this dot over here where to draw, and I'm simply drawing over here this line. Now I have over here the smoothness is 5, the number of points is 1. Now we're going to uncheck this, I believe, and now we're going to change the smoothness to 6. Okay, and now we're going to draw over here and over here. So what we've done over here is we have drawn two profiles basically. So one of them has the default spline, so there's no added segments, while the second one we have added segments. That's basically what we have done over here. And now we're going to go to vertex mode, turn on vertex mode, something we don't use that very often. And in vertex mode, you can see we can select whatever is green selected. We select every second vertex over here, and we're simply going to move them. And we move it to X to -18. So let's see if I can make it a gizmo. Just click next. And we're simply moving it a little bit like this. Okay, and we turn off the vertex mode. And that's it basically, we close the deal. So what we have done here is this is a spline still, but the idea of adding segments means you add control points. We added control points actually. So in that case, we move it, we get this kind of thing over here. Okay, so now let's go back to the main profile. We're selecting the main profile, and because they are rounded, they needed to be splined, so they're actually splines now, and we're simply lofting it. Now I still have to wait till this finishes. As I said before, you can click cancel in real life, but it's not available in tutorial. And now I have this option over here to go to rails. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add the rail. So this by default will make just this shape, and this shape by itself you can also get from bridge tool, and maybe even easier and faster bridge tool, but the feature we're going to use now is not available in the bridge tool, and that's the rails. That's the main concept over here, which I think I've not shown before. So I'm going to go to add rails, and I'm going to select this rail over here, and again I have to wait because I don't have the cancel option here, and then I add the second rail, which is this one, and this is going to do the magic. Okay, so why did we have to add this rail over here? If I added this first, you could have visualized it, but now we added first this, I can visualize it, so I have to explain it. So if we're going to add this rail, it's basically going to bend the entire shape, and basically it will bend the back also. It will kind of offset the entire shape. So after adding this, we need to add the back one as well to kind of make it as a stopper, to say, okay, here is where the rails stops, and that's basically the way rails work. You can add multiple profiles and make them work. The only thing here is that you need to know, which is very interesting, is that's a limitation in Rails and any software you're going to have that's not related specifically to SelfCAD, is a rail must touch the profile. So we added this rail by clicking on a vertex on this circle, and the same thing over here in the bottom, clicking on a circle to connect them. The condition of a rail actually is two conditions. Number one, they must touch the profile vertex. You cannot just touching, meaning like just touch it without intersecting it. Touching a vertex doesn't mean touching. They must intersect a vertex. They must really connect to it, even though they are separate profile. They're not the same profile, but they must meet at a vertex point, and the same to other. And the second condition is they actually must go through all profiles. You cannot make a rail just on two profiles. However, and this is something unique to SelfCAD, SelfCAD will automatically fill in rails when they are simple. So the designer over here is drawn only from this profile onto this profile over here, and technically you cannot see it, but technically what SelfCAD has done, they have filled in the rails over here and over here a straight rail, because otherwise this wouldn't work. So SelfCAD is doing that automatically. So it's sometimes easier, you can skip the remaining, but SelfCAD will not be able to fix it if you skip something in the middle. So for example, if you would have clicked on top and connect the rail, and then click maybe in the bottom rail and the bottom profile and clicked on it and snapped it to it, basically drawn the rail correctly, but skipped center profiles and not connect to it, this will not work because we cannot automatically connect them. So basically, yeah, so that's the idea. You need to connect them, the connection, but you can leave over the ends and SelfCAD will fill it in. That's basically the idea. Okay, so now we can do the same thing as before. We're going to go to cube selection and select just the bottom piece to give colors and finalize it. And I'm just going to click next to color it, inverse select and color it. And that's basically it. Okay, so now we're going to add is the next shape over here is we're going to use now shape generator. So this is a tool that is also used a few times already in different tutorials, and this has more options than basic shapes. The main idea over here is we're just changing the size, the radius, we're changing the number of edges, which is the smoothness, the height. So far this segment is very basic. If you're going to click next, fills it in, you see we just created a basic shape over here. Very similar to cylinder, you can do everything. But the main benefit comes in that we can add segments. This is what we have now. So we're going to go over here to the segment and we click plus to add a segment. And now the second segment can have different settings. This setting by itself is also very basic settings, but actually not. We have here the height and we also add a bevel. So we can add a bevel. So let me just type in the height should be 3 so we can visualize it better what's happening. So we're just setting the height. And then the bevel is 0.2, a small bevel, but the level will be adjusted. The level is 2. And you can see over here, this basically gives me this look. So if you would have done this manually, yeah, technically, yeah, it would be difficult. You can create a cylinder like this and then scale the top cylinder and then extrude and then scale it down, make the next one. So you could have done this manually, many steps, but over here you have one segment with just a bevel added that it's doing it. And I'm going to repeat the same thing, add another segment, and now make it look like this, simple with auto bevel, and this as this segment, and now we add another segment, and we're going to add the bevel again. So basically this is kind of alternate, straight and alternate, and then this is basically just finalizing it, basically making the same shape, adding another segment, so you can see we can build all in one shape, which is quite remarkable. And positioned over here, you created the entire shape, and you could have done the same thing as I said with extrusion and scale. It's a simple scale, extrusion, scale, extrusion, but it's much easier this way. There's also another interesting thing, just a side note, that in the advanced settings, there is an option to save this as a macro. You can save this any design and save it and then load it in another design, which is, you know, quite helpful. You can make your standard kind of tools and stuff in this and save them as macros and have your own custom list of all of your macros. You can see you already have here some macros saved from before, and you can just load them and they will work. Okay, so now we finalized that. We created this shape, and this is just a basic shape, so we're just going to color it now. And now we are moving to the next shape. Let's say we can use a cube now. Okay, so a cube is just basic sizes and positioning, the same thing over here. So we are positioning the cube over here, basically this. And now we're going to edge select that. So we have a basic cube and we're going to select these edges over here on top, the small edges over here, one on top and one on the bottom. So if I can zoom into it, okay. So we have something, by the way, this idea that you can zoom into the pointer. This is a setting you can do in the camera settings, if I remember where this is. It's over here in the settings. Is the camera settings. I'm not sure if it totally will let me open it. Yes, actually it does. Zoom towards the mouse. You see this button, zoom towards the mouse, and that's what you want to have in this case. Is I can point my mouse to it when it's difficult to see, and then just zoom into, so it zooms towards the mouse. And then I click on this one, so we have both of these selected over here, just two edges, and then we simply can add a fillet. Before we used already chamfer in this tutorial. Now we're going to use a fillet. And just to speed it up, I'll use automatic, and basically it rounds this thing over here and we finalize it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is color it, simply color it. And now what we're going to do, confirm the color. Okay, so now we're going to mirror the same piece that we just created, click through to make a copy, and we just changing it to copy it along the back side. but along the back side it will copy right on the back, so right here. So we're going to add an offset of 3.5, and this basically makes the copy over here, and we finalize it. Okay, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to show this object over here that is hidden, the main piece. And now what we're going to do, we're going to go another drawing over here. Okay, so what are we going to draw? We're going to go to click over here on this. So we still have this plane. By default it remembers the plane, so we use the plane that we have used before, and we click over here to draw a line, draw an edge. Let's see what tells me here. On the highlighted point to draw an edge. Okay, I click here and then I click here, so we just created an edge. A simple line over here is created, and now we're drawing another edge. So it's actually drawing here just 2 lines, and then we're going to go now to an arc to draw an arc, but the arc is going to be drawn on a different plane. So we're going to reset the plane now to use the default plane, and we're also going to uncheck the profile, so we make a new profile. And now on this profile over here we're going to this is something, a mistake I continuously make. I keep while in the drawing using my left mouse to move, but the reality is that in drawing the left mouse is used for drawing, so you have to use the right mouse key to rotate the camera. So camera movement switches over to the right mouse key while in drawing. So anyways, I'll click here to create an arc, click on this point, and then have to zoom. I have to first type in the value 8, so the size, and then I click over here. It's going to be a tiny arc, and then type in the value 5, and then finalize it. So it's basically just created a small arc over here, and we're finalizing it. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to use this arc is selected first. It's already selected, and now I'm selecting these edges that we have created over here, these 2 edges over here, these black lines over here. We're going to select them, and we're going to use the follow path, and this is basically going to go to extrude and finalize. So we got these edges over here, this basic edges over here, but this is not the final. We're going to taper it to give it a better look. So we're going to taper it along the Z. That makes it over here wider on top and shorter in the bottom, and finalize it. And now we're going to color it, and if you can see which color over here, the black color. Finalize. Okay, so now we're going to add thickness because we used an arc which is not a closed shape, so this is basically not closed. The inside is still hollow, open. This is just the surface, but we're going to taper it add thickness, a very small thickness, just of 1. So, and finalize it. Okay, so now we are done with this. We're going to create a new shape to finalize the piece. So we're going to add a new cylinder. Let's see what we're going to do. We're going to set the radius, the height, segment. So basically just minimizing everything. Actually, we're going to change the segments here also. Let's see, click next. We're adding segments 8, so this cylinder also gets segments in the other direction over here. So you can see this is divided in segments, so it's positioned. We did positioning and rotation, everything, but we added segments as well that we didn't do before. And the reason we added segments here, because we're going to select these segments now. So we're going to go to the face mode and advanced selection. We're going to do loop selection, but before we did it with edges, now we do it with the faces. And this, we could have done this because we divided these faces over here, and the same thing on the other side. So we're going to loop select this. Oops, just clicking here, and now we have selected the edges on both sides, selected faces. We're going to go to extrusion, and we're going to extrude it just by 1. We're dealing here with small shapes, so every small number makes a difference. And we basically extrude it like this, and now we turn on off the face mode, and we're just going to color it. Clicking coloring, and that's basic. Now we deselect this shape and we move on to round object. So we're going to basically round. We deselected the face mode, and what we have selected now, we have selected the main shape over here, the bottom shape, and we're going to just round this to 2 to round objects. Okay, so this is this object over here. So we actually added even more smoothness than we have done before with the loft. This is just cleaning up now, finalizing the look of the shape. And now we're going to add another shape over here, which is basically just this piece over here that we just added. and we're going to add a segment here again, and the next segment it's going to have a bevel as well. So let's see, so this is over here, and add another segment, and we position this shape over here on top, this shape. So rotate it, so basically we added this shape over here now, and clicking next and coloring it, and we are almost done with this tutorial. So this is basically here, and now again we're just cleaning up the looks. So this is the final shape, so we're going to rotate this shape over here to make it look kind of a little bit more realistic, and moving it up a little bit sideways, and now we are going to stitch together all of these pieces together. So we can go stitch and scoop, and we can actually reduce, I'm sorry, not stitch together, we're going to make the holes. So this needs to cut out the hole, so they're going to work. So we're just going to remove this shape and this shape from the main piece, but we also want to, this is going to make the hole, and it takes a minute because we're dealing here with a lot of faces. So you see over here we created these holes, but we're also going to keep the keep a subtracted object, so we want to stay with the original objects as well. And now we are left to turn on this mode, and that's basically it. So you can see we created this entire thing. So just to recap what we have done, we have created some basic shapes over here, is just to get a kind of a visual look of how the profiles need to be created. We then use these shapes to copy the profiles instead of drawing the profiles. We then converted the profiles into splines, because if they are rounded they need to be splines for loft. We lofted them. Then we did the same thing in the bottom, same flow, but we also added guides to make this rounded piece. And then we used shape generator to create this piece plus this piece over here. We used follow path to, we draw a line basically like this, and we used follow path, and we drew an arc and follow path to create this. And then we created a basic cylinder and extruded this piece to make it look like this, and we used stitch and scoop to cut out the pieces from here and this, and then kept the original and just used color. So that's basically it, and I hope you learned something new. This feature for Loft, which is quite powerful, this is something unique to this tutorial, and you can see how you can make really beautiful shapes with this type of feature. We used also a little bit the deformation. We skewed this piece over here, and we used round objects to round even more this piece. And yeah, so that's basically it. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if this was helpful, if you want me to show anything else. Thank you, bye.